The crack of Samuel Hartwell's whip echoes across the Wyoming plains as his horse rears against the biting November wind. Blood trickles from a fresh cut on Margaret O'Brien's cheek as she stumbles forward, her wrists bound with frayed rope. The Irish woman's green eyes burn with defiance despite her weakened state, tuberculosis having hollowed her cheeks and dulled her once vibrant red hair. "You said you'd remove these bindings once we left Cheyenne," Maggie gasps, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. Her voice carries the lilting accent of County Cork mixed with something else, something that makes the massive Native American riding beside them turn his head sharply. Joseph Crowfeather, known as White Bear to his people, and standing nearly 7 feet tall even while mounted, studies the woman with dark eyes that seem to hold the weight of ancient mountains. His long black hair, streaked with premature gray, whips in the wind as he guides his paint horse alongside Hartwell's mare. "The woman speaks truth, Hartwell. Bound hands will slow our journey through Sioux territory." Hartwell's laugh is harsh and calculating. "My property, my rules, breed." The slur rolls off his tongue with practiced cruelty as he adjusts his beaver skin coat. "She stays bound until I'm certain she won't run. Cost me $300 to buy her freedom from that cat house, and I intend to get my money's worth." The word freedom hangs in the air like a prayer and a curse. Maggie's eyes meet Joseph's for a moment, and something passes between them, an understanding born of shared suffering. Both know the bitter taste of being considered property, of having their humanity reduced to dollar amounts in ledger books. "Where exactly are we headed, Mr. Hartwell?" Joseph asks, his deep voice carrying the careful neutrality he's learned to adopt around white men with power. "You said 2 weeks' journey into the Black Hills, but those are sacred lands. The Lakota will not welcome trespassers, especially not during the winter months when the spirits of our ancestors walk closer to this world." Hartwell's eyes gleam with avarice as he pulls out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed and filled with cryptic symbols and rough maps. "According to this, there's a burial ground near Devil's Tower. Old Indian treasure, artifacts worth more than both your lives combined." He glances at Maggie with predatory interest. "And our Irish Rose here knows exactly where to find it. Don't you, sweetheart?" Maggie's jaw tightens, but she remains silent, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of brown grass and distant mountains. The wind carries the scent of snow and something else, something that makes her shiver with more than cold. It smells like memory, like a childhood she's spent decades trying to forget. As they ride deeper into the wilderness, Joseph notices details that trouble him. The way Maggie sits her horse with unconscious grace despite her bindings, as if she's ridden these plains before. The way her eyes track the flight patterns of eagles overhead with reverent attention. Most disturbing of all, the way she hums under her breath, a melody he recognizes from his grandmother's lullabies. "Tell me about this treasure," Joseph says quietly to Hartwell as they make camp near a frozen creek. "What makes you so certain it exists?" Hartwell builds the fire with nervous energy, constantly glancing at the darkening sky. "Found her in Kansas City, working the saloons. Drunk cowboys love to brag about family secrets, and she heard plenty. One old-timer, dying of drink, told her about a wagon train massacre in '52. Said the survivors buried their valuables before the Indians finished them off." He lowers his voice conspiratorially. "But here's the interesting part, Crowfeather. The old bastard claimed some of them goods weren't just settler belongings. Said they'd been carrying sacred Indian artifacts, stolen from burial mounds back east." Joseph's blood runs cold. Sacred objects, removed from their resting places, would carry terrible spiritual weight. His people believe such desecration brings curses upon both the thieves and the land itself. "And you believe this woman knows the location?" "I know she does." Hartwell's smile is wolfish in the firelight. "Because the old drunk was her father." Across the fire, Maggie's hands have gone still in her lap. She's been listening, and the pain in her eyes speaks of truths more complex than simple greed. Joseph sees something in her expression that reminds him of his own reflection in still water, the look of someone carrying ancestral ghosts. That night, as Hartwell snores in his bedroll, Joseph cuts Maggie's bonds with his skinning knife. She doesn't flee, as he somehow knew she wouldn't. Instead, she tends to the fire with practiced hands and speaks in a voice barely above a whisper. "My father wasn't just Irish," she begins, her words careful and measured. My mother, she was Lakota, captured during a raid when she was no more than a child, raised by white families who told her she was rescued, not stolen. Maggie's fingers trace patterns in the dirt, symbols that Joseph recognizes as sacred Lakota pictographs. She never forgot her real family, though. Never forgot the songs, the stories, the location of the burial grounds. Joseph's massive frame goes rigid. Your mother's people. Do you know their clan? Their family name. She called herself Sarah O'Brien after the white family took her, but her birth name was Singing Wind. Maggie's voice breaks slightly. She used to tell me about a brother, a boy who grew tall as the pine trees and strong as the bear spirits. She said he had eyes like thunderclouds and would someday come to bring her home. The recognition hits Joseph like a physical blow. His sister, lost during a cavalry raid 30 years ago, had been named Singing Wind. He'd spent decades believing her dead, mourning a child who might have lived, loved, and died among strangers. The grief he thought he'd buried rises in his chest like floodwater. The treasure Hartwell seeks, Maggie continues, unaware of the storm raging in Joseph's heart. It's not gold or silver. It's the sacred bones and artifacts my mother helped her white family steal from Lakota burial sites. She spent her life trying to figure out how to return them to their proper resting place without revealing her true identity. She looks directly at Joseph then, her green eyes reflecting the firelight like sacred stones. I'm dying, White Bear. The lung sickness will take me before another spring comes. But before I die, I want to finish what my mother started. I want to bring our people's ancestors home. Joseph stares at this pale, frail woman who might be his own blood, who carries the weight of two worlds in her failing body. The irony isn't lost on him that Hartwell, in his greed, may have unknowingly orchestrated the very reunion that could heal wounds carved into both their souls by decades of loss and separation. In the distance, a wolf howls, its voice carrying across the plains like an omen. Joseph knows that tomorrow will bring them closer to sacred ground, closer to truths that have been buried too long. He also knows that before this journey ends, one of them will pay the ultimate price for the secrets they carry. As Maggie settles back into her blankets, she whispers words that chill Joseph's blood with their terrible beauty. When the time comes, you'll understand why Hartwell's money was never payment for my freedom. It was payment for my death. The fire crackles and dies as snow begins to fall, covering their tracks and erasing evidence of their passage. But some paths, Joseph knows, can never be hidden from the spirits who guard the sacred places of his people. Tomorrow they ride deeper into the Black Hills, toward a confrontation with the past that will test not just their courage, but their very souls. In his dreams that night, Joseph hears his sister's voice calling his name across 30 years of silence, and he knows that whatever treasure lies buried in the sacred ground ahead, the true prize may be more precious and more terrible than gold. Dawn breaks over the Black Hills like a crimson wound against the gray sky, and Joseph Crowfeather knows they are riding toward more than just sacred ground. The revelation of Maggie's heritage has haunted his dreams, filling them with images of his sister's face and the terrible possibility that this dying woman carries his family's blood in her veins. The morning air is so cold it burns his lungs, and each breath comes out as prayer smoke rising toward ancestors who may be watching. Maggie rides in silence, her tuberculosis worse after the frigid night. Blood specks the snow where she's coughed, dark as garnets against the white expanse. Her face has taken on the translucent quality of those near death, skin stretched thin over bones that seem too sharp. Yet her eyes remain alert, scanning the landscape with the intensity of someone reading a sacred text written in stone and sky. How much farther? Hartwell demands, his voice cracking from the cold. His expensive coat is dusted with frost, and his horse's breath creates clouds that obscure his vision. We've been riding toward those cursed peaks for 3 days, and I haven't seen hide nor hair of any burial ground. Sacred places don't announce themselves to those who seek to defile them, Joseph replies, his deep voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. They reveal themselves only when the spirits judge the seeker's heart worthy. Hartwell snorts with derision, but Joseph notices how the white man's eyes dart nervously toward the towering rock formations ahead. Devil's Tower rises like a giant's finger pointing accusations at the sky, its vertical columns of stone seeming to shift and move in the morning light. The Lakota call it Bear Lodge, a place where the spirit world touches the earth so closely that the boundary between life and death becomes thin as winter ice. As they climb higher into the hills, the very air seems to thicken with presence. Joseph feels the weight of countless generations watching their approach, judging their intentions. His horse, a wise old paint with scars from cavalry sabers, becomes increasingly nervous, ears flicking at sounds only animals can hear. "There," Maggie whispers, pointing with a trembling hand toward a sheltered valley below a ring of standing stones. The place my mother described, where the earth holds its breath. The valley is hidden from casual view, accessible only through a narrow passage between two towering rock walls. Ancient petroglyphs cover the stone surfaces, telling stories in a language that predates written history. Joseph recognizes some of the symbols, teachings passed down through generations of his people about the sacred responsibility of honoring the dead. Hartwell's greed overcomes his superstitious fear as they descend into the valley. "Look at those markings," he breathes, his eyes gleaming with avarice. "Authentic Indian art, worth a fortune to collectors back east." He dismounts and immediately begins examining the stone walls, running his fingers over sacred symbols with the careless touch of a man who sees only monetary value. The burial ground itself is a circle of low stone mounds, each one carefully constructed according to ancient traditions. Prayer flags made from bits of cloth and feathers flutter from wooden poles, their colors faded by decades of weather, but still carrying the hopes and sorrows of the living. In the center of the circle stands a single massive stone, carved with images of eagles, bears, and human figures dancing in eternal celebration. Joseph dismounts slowly, feeling the sacred nature of this place settling into his bones like winter cold. This is more than just a cemetery. It's a doorway between worlds, a place where the living can speak with those who have gone before. His grandmother's voice echoes in his memory, warning him about the terrible consequences of disturbing such sacred ground. "My mother said the stolen artifacts are buried with a white family who took them," Maggie says, her voice growing weaker with each word. "A wagon train that was attacked not far from here. They buried the sacred objects with their own dead, thinking it would protect them in the afterlife." Hartwell's excitement is palpable as he begins examining the mounds, looking for signs of more recent burial. "Here," he shouts, pointing to a section where the stones are arranged differently, where white man's tools have clearly been used alongside traditional native methods. "This one's different from the others." Joseph's blood runs cold as he recognizes the burial style. This mound contains both Lakota and white settlers, buried together in a desperate attempt at spiritual protection that his people would consider blasphemous. The mixing of sacred objects with foreign dead would create spiritual chaos, trapping souls between worlds and bringing curses upon the land. As Hartwell begins tearing at the stones with frantic energy, Maggie slides from her horse and collapses to her knees in the snow. Joseph rushes to her side, catching her before she falls completely. Her breathing is labored, each inhalation a struggle that rattles in her chest like dice in a bone cup. "The sickness is winning," she whispers, her Irish accent fading to reveal something deeper, older. When she speaks again, it's in Lakota, words that Joseph recognizes as a death song his grandmother once taught him. The realization hits him like lightning. This woman doesn't just have Lakota blood. She's been raised in the traditions, taught the sacred ways despite her white appearance. "Wait," Joseph calls to Hartwell, but the white man is beyond hearing, driven mad by greed and the proximity of imagined treasure. He's already pulled away enough stones to reveal the edge of a wooden coffin, its surface carved with both Christian crosses and Lakota sacred symbols. "Stop," Joseph roars, his voice echoing off the valley walls like thunder. "You don't understand what you're doing." But Hartwell is lost to avarice, prying open the coffin with his knife and revealing its contents. Inside lies the skeleton of a young white woman, her bones arranged according to Lakota custom with sacred objects placed around her body. Turquoise necklaces, carved bone pipes, and eagle feathers create a fortune in artifacts. But Joseph sees something else that makes his heart stop. Clutched in the skeleton's hands is a small leather pouch, the kind Lakota children use to carry their most precious possessions. Joseph has seen that exact pouch before, in memories so old they feel like dreams. His sister had carried one just like it, filled with smooth stones from their childhood stream. "Those are my people's sacred objects," Joseph says quietly, his voice deadly calm. "And that woman was buried with them because she was Lakota, raised white, but never forgetting her true people." Maggie struggles to speak, blood now flowing freely from her mouth. "My mother," she gasps. "Singing Wind. She made them bury her here, with the sacred objects she'd helped steal. She thought it would begin to make amends." The truth crashes over Joseph like an avalanche. This isn't just any burial ground. This is where his sister lies, where she'd been brought after years of living as a white woman, finally returning to sacred ground in death. And Maggie, this dying woman he's been protecting, is his own blood, his sister's daughter. "You're her child," he whispers, the words torn from his throat like pieces of his soul. "Singing Wind's daughter. My niece." Hartwell, oblivious to the spiritual earthquake happening around him, continues looting the grave with frantic energy. "Look at this," he shouts, holding up a ceremonial pipe carved from sacred red stone. "This alone is worth more than I paid for both of you." Maggie reaches up with trembling fingers and touches Joseph's face, her eyes holding the light of recognition and forgiveness. "Uncle," she breathes in Lakota. "I've been looking for you my whole life." The word uncle in his native tongue breaks something fundamental inside Joseph's chest. All the years of searching, of mourning his lost sister, of believing himself alone in the world, and she had lived, had loved, had created this brave young woman who now lies dying in his arms. "Bury me," Maggie whispers, her voice growing fainter with each word. "You bought my freedom. Hartwell's money was never for my body or my knowledge. It was payment for my journey home, for the chance to die on sacred ground with my people." Joseph understands now why she never tried to escape, why she guided them here despite Hartwell's cruelty. She hadn't been leading them to treasure. She'd been coming home to die, bringing her uncle with her so that someone of her blood could perform the proper burial rites and reunite her with her mother's spirit. The treasure was never gold. She continues, each word a struggle. It was bringing you here, to find her, to learn you're not alone in this world. Hartwell's triumphant shout echoes across the valley as he uncovers more artifacts, but his celebration is cut short by a sound that makes his blood freeze. From somewhere in the rocks comes the haunting call of a death song, voices of the ancestors welcoming one of their own home. Joseph looks up to see figures emerging from the shadows between the stones, Lakota warriors painted for ceremony, their faces solemn with sacred purpose. But as his eyes adjust to the morning light, he realizes these aren't living men. They're spirits, guardians of this sacred place, come to witness the return of Singing Wind's daughter to the earth of her people. Hartwell scrambles backward, dropping his stolen artifacts as terror overwhelms greed. What are they?" he stammers, his face white as bone. "Justice," Joseph answers simply, rising to his full, imposing height with Maggie still cradled in his arms. "The spirits of this place come to collect what was stolen." The ghostly warriors move with purpose, not threatening violence, but making it clear that Hartwell's desecration will go no further. One of them, a tall figure with the bearing of a chief, approaches Joseph and nods with grave respect before fading back into the morning mist. As Maggie takes her final breath, she smiles with peaceful recognition, her eyes fixed on something Joseph cannot see. "Mother," she whispers in Lakota, "I brought him home." The giant Native American warrior, feared across 3 territories for his strength and stoic demeanor, breaks completely. 30 years of grief, of searching, of believing himself the last of his family, pours out of him in great, wrenching sobs that echo off the valley walls like prayers made audible. Hartwell flees then, abandoning his stolen treasure and his horses, running on foot toward the valley entrance with the desperate speed of a man pursued by his own guilt. The spirits let him go, for living with the knowledge of what he's witnessed will be punishment enough. Joseph spends the rest of the day preparing Maggie's body according to Lakota tradition, wrapping her in his own ceremonial blanket and placing sacred objects around her still form. As he works, he speaks to her in their shared language, telling her about her mother's childhood, about the family she'd never known but always belonged to. when he places her body in the earth beside her mother's grave, completing the circle that Singing Wind had begun decades ago. Joseph finally understands the true meaning of the words that had haunted his dreams. Hartwell had indeed bought her freedom, not from a brothel, but from a lifetime of spiritual exile. The money had been payment for her final journey home, for the chance to die surrounded by the love of her people rather than alone among strangers. The secret of the grave hadn't been treasure at all, but the revelation that love transcends death, that family bonds can survive decades of separation, and that sometimes the greatest victories come through surrender. As Joseph performs the burial rites under the eternal gaze of Devil's Tower, he knows that he is no longer the last of his family, for their spirits live on in this sacred place where the earth holds its breath and the ancestors dance in the wind. The snow begins to fall again as he rides away from the valley, but Joseph no longer feels the cold. He carries with him the warmth of reunion, the peace of understanding, and the knowledge that some purchases, like the one Hartwell unknowingly made, are worth more than all the gold in the Black Hills. In his heart, he hears Maggie's voice joining her mother's in the eternal song of their people, and for the first time in 30 years, White Bear is truly home.